So I got to spend a few days with the Leica D-Lux 8, and now it's officially out, and I can talk about it when this video goes up. I didn't really want to make a typical first impressions or review on, things that I get to check out a few days. It's not a long enough time for me to really test the camera out. So first impressions is usually what I like to do in situations like that, but this made me think more about the daily carry kind of camera and what photographers are looking for in a camera that they're going to take with them everywhere if they're not going to use their phone. And why not just use your phone at that point with as good as the cameras are nowadays? That's really what I want to focus this video on. But first, I will give you just sort of my first impressions with the D-Lux 8. Leica Camera USA was kind enough to send it out for me to try out for a few days, so big shout out to them. I actually filmed this video when I had the camera in hand. This is my M11. I'm holding it here because I'm going to talk a little bit about using this in comparison to the D-Lux 8. But I don't have the camera anymore. I sent it back, and the video that I filmed before with the camera in hand was formatted on the SD card, and I thought I'd imported it, and I hadn't. This is the second time I'm making this video, and it's very late, and I woke up this morning and I can't hear out of my left ear. It's just so clogged. It sounds like I have one AirPod in with noise cancellation, and so we're doing great. Here we go. Let's get started. The D-Lux 8 on paper, I think, is going to be very similar to the D-Lux 7. I know the EVF has been updated. How much of the camera elsewhere has been updated internally, I don't know, but I know that the design of the camera is much more in line with the current M, Q, and SL system. They've redone the body. It looks and feels like a smaller Leica Q camera. Looking at photos online, I could tell it was going to be small, but when I opened up the box and actually held the camera in hand for the first time, I was genuinely surprised at just how small it is. And I've never owned a Micro Four Thirds camera before, so there's a whole category of these compact point-and-shoot cameras that a lot of people are way more familiar with than I am. I'd never even shot with the D-Lux 7 or any of the previous versions or the Panasonics that are very similar. I've never tried any of those before at all. But having shot with the Q, the Q2, the Q3, the way this feels is very similar. It's just shrunk down a lot. And for the few days that I had the camera in hand, I tried to use it as if it was my phone. Like the same kind of things that I would typically just grab my phone to quickly shoot. I just kept the camera around me, and I wanted to see if I could switch that and just use the camera instead of the phone. You've got a 24 to 75 millimeter equivalent lens with a maximum aperture from f1.8 to 2.8, so it's variable aperture but still really fast. Where on the M cameras you have the on-off switch around the shutter release. That's actually your zoom rocker for the zoom lens. Everything else on the camera is going to look and feel very similar to an M or a Q. You have your physical shutter speed dial, your physical aperture ring on the lens. You have a little aspect ratio switch on the lens as well, which I honestly thought was kind of fun. You still are recording in the full, the full sensor readout if you're shooting D&G at least. So you're not going to just always have that crop, but if you want to just shoot with that crop in mind, I actually kind of like the little aspect ratio switch. You'll also see a switch on the lens for autofocus or manual focus, as well as switching the autofocus into the macro mode if you're specifically wanting to shoot things really close. I shot some test photos at the minimum focus distance for both the widest you can go at the 24 millimeter equivalent, and then also the minimum focus distance at the 75 millimeter equivalent. Obviously, the closer you get to your subject, the more razor thin that depth of field is going to get, and that comes into play, I think, with a lot of this sort of like, how much is enough in a daily camera? Like, what do I really want? And sensor size and not being able to get that really shallow depth of field look. For whatever reason, photographers are picky. That's always one thing that gets brought up, and I've said that myself. I've thought I like having a full frame sensor. I like the way it looks. I like that my lenses are being used at the actual focal length that I want. If I adapt this 35 millimeter lens onto an APS-C camera, I'm not working with a full 35 anymore. Those little things, I think it's easy for photographers to get hung up on. And I think for whatever reason, maybe it's just because photographers nowadays, all of us, were incredibly spoiled by what we have access to. For whatever reason, I think people look at Micro Four Thirds now as just something of the past, or at least that's how people have talked about it in recent years, as just why go back to something like that based on everything that we have access to now? Full frame cameras are getting incredibly small. There's really small APS-C cameras as well in the same size as the D-Lux 8. The M11, this is a full frame camera that I take with me everywhere, and it's incredibly small. Being used to carrying around a DSLR for years, like a long time ago, being able to take something like this with me anywhere, it's no issue whatsoever. Not to mention the resolution. The resolution of the D-Lux 8 is 17 megapixels. This is 60 megapixels, full frame camera. The files that I get from it, whether it's bright light, low light, I feel like I can handle anything with this one camera. No matter what I come across, this is more than enough for really anything. But if it's more than enough, then like what is enough? What's the bare minimum that people or photographers specifically really need day to day? I use my iPhone a lot for photography, just taking random photos of the family. It's quick and easy. And the D-Lux 8 I tried to use in a similar way. It has an EVF, which is great, but surprisingly I didn't find myself using it all that often. It's a decent EVF. It's definitely better than I thought it would be given the size. However, most of the time using the camera, I was just holding it out in front of me, tapping to focus or tapping to focus with my thumb, and then just doing everything completely one-handed. That's typically how I'm using my iPhone. If I'm using my iPhone, it's mostly out of necessity because it's quick, easy. I can just do it one-handed. I'm either holding a child or I'm helping a kid with something, and a lot of times there's just a lot of moving parts, a lot of things going on, and those are the kind of things I like to shoot. And so sometimes the phone is just the best option around me. Using the D-Lux 8 in similar situations, it was kind of freeing to be able to see exactly what I was going to get. It was kind of like having the control that I normally don't have with the iPhone in terms of just dialing in my exposure or getting things specifically to where I wanted them for depth of field, for exposure, any of those kind of like creative choices. I was able to just set that in and just forget about it and then just shoot as if I was shooting with my iPhone. And as great as the iPhone is, any photographer, if you pull these files into Lightroom and actually really start working with them as if it was a file from a proper camera, it's just different. And being able to take the DNG files from the D-Lux 8 and bring those into Lightroom, they look so much better than an iPhone photo would. And I was genuinely surprised by the image quality. I went into it from that sort of perspective of like, Micro Four Thirds, I'm used to shooting with a full frame camera and that much resolution. I don't know if I'm really going to enjoy this, but I was genuinely surprised. How much of a difference are you really going to be able to see if you don't know what the photo was made with? So I posted a photo that I shot of Forrest in our living room. It was just a close-up shot, very shallow depth of field because I was shooting up close. And I just cropped it to a 4.5 and I just posted it on my Instagram stories and I asked people to guess, what do you think I shot this with? And the responses were all over the place. A few guesses for the Nikon Z system, a full frame mirrorless system, SL3, a full frame camera, Rollei 35AF, a new film camera that's coming out soon that I haven't shot with yet, but a full frame camera nonetheless. One person guessed correctly. One person said, is it the new D-Lux 8? But by far the most common guess was a Fuji GFX camera. A digital medium format camera was the most common guess when I posted this picture, and it was a Micro Four Thirds sensor. So all of the debate over Micro Four Thirds sensor is, too small or it's not enough, or people saying that about APS-C sensors. Nowadays, people say, we have digital medium format, why settle for anything less? Most people thought that came from a GFX, and coming from a 17 megapixel Micro Four Thirds sensor, it was just interesting to see that. And this was one specific example. I'm sure if you shoot 100 different photos in different scenarios, maybe in certain scenarios it would be more apparent that it wasn't medium format, but I just thought that was kind of interesting. But I had a lot more fun with the camera than I thought I was going to be completely honest. I've never been drawn to the compact point and shoot cameras because, again, having a camera like the M11, I'm spoiled. I have a full frame camera that's already very compact, but it did seem like just such a perfect kind of everyday family camera. Like it's something that easily I could shoot with, but I could hand it off to Molly or even Elliot. Elliot could shoot with it. And it's mostly, I guess, cosmetic upgrade. I would say functionality upgrade maybe. I just love the design of the current Leica system, the M system, the Q system, the SL, all of them being consistent in design, and now the D-Lux line kind of fitting in perfectly with that. Everything just feels second nature coming from the other systems. I haven't ordered one yet at the time of recording, but I had a lot of fun with the camera, and for an everyday camera, it feels like it would be enough. And again, I say that coming from someone who has 60 megapixels just always there. I like to think of it as like, no matter what I see, no matter what I come across, I've got an amazing sensor, tons of resolution, more than enough. No matter what I come across, I'm going to be able to squeeze the absolute most out of it, just in terms of image quality. But the 17 megapixels on that sensor, I mean, even zooming in on photos, for me, probably most of the stuff that I shoot, in all honesty, I could probably get by with just that alone. It would take a much more in-depth test and time with the camera to really say that, but it surprised me for sure. So I'm very curious how people respond to this camera, with the whole small compact cameras being a really high market right now. It'll be interesting. I could see street photographers really kind of latching onto this camera. It also comes with a flash, a really small but surprisingly powerful flash as well. Again, this isn't a real in-depth video. I'm sure there's going to be tons of people making videos about the camera today with all sorts of in-depth tech specs and all of those sort of things. It really just got me more thinking about who the camera might really be for, and again, just how much is enough, because I think most of us are just spoiled by what we have. So very curious what you all have to say about the D-Lux 8 and just this whole kind of conversation about how much is really enough for most of us. We'll keep that conversation going down below. But that's it for this video. I've got to get this edited and uploaded for in the morning. So thank you guys for watching. I love you guys, and I'll see you soon.